I hadn't cried in 17 years. Not when I made my first billion. Not when I fired 300 people in one afternoon. Not even when my mother died holding a letter I never read. But there I was, Christopher Green, CEO of Titan Ventures, the man Forbes called the Iron Architect, shaking like a child on a marble fountain ledge in the middle of Glenbrook Mall while Christmas music blared and shoppers pretended not to stare. My $5,000 suit felt like sandpaper. The neon lights were knives. Every laughing child was a ghost. Then I felt it, a tiny hand on my knee. I looked down, and there she was. 5 years old, gap-toothed, wearing a ridiculous red coat and a knit hat with bare ears. She was holding out a stuffed animal with one ear missing, and her voice cut through the chaos like a bell. "Stop crying, mister. I'll give you my mom. She fixes everything." I should have stood up. I should have walked away. But when I looked into those bright, fearless eyes, something inside me, something I'd buried the day my little sister vanished in a crowd just like this one, cracked wide open. And when her mother arrived, breathless and beautiful and so completely unaware that I'd destroyed her entire life 3 years ago, I made the worst decision a man like me could make. I let myself hope. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something as a friend. This story gets darker and more beautiful than you can imagine, and it would mean the world to me if you'd hit that like button and subscribe right now. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep sharing stories like this one. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love knowing there are people all over the world who still believe broken things can be made whole. May God bless you as you do so. Her name was Mary Winter. She smelled like cedarwood and vanilla. Her hands were stained with paint and hope. And I was about to find out that the anonymous organ donor who saved my mother's life 8 years ago, the angel I'd spent a fortune trying to find, was standing right in front of me. The same woman whose father I'd bankrupted without a second thought. The universe, it seemed, had a sick sense of humor. And my mentor, the man who made me into a monster, was about to make sure we all paid the price. I showed up at her door 3 days later with a check for $10,000 and a lie about gratitude. The address Jenny had scribbled on a mall receipt led me to a sagging brownstone in East Camden, the kind of neighborhood where my company bought buildings just to demolish them. I'd expected squalor. I'd expected to feel superior. What I found instead was magic drowning in poverty. Mary opened the door in a paint-stained apron, her golden brown hair tied back with what looked like a carpenter's pencil, and for a moment neither of us spoke. She had flour on her cheek. Flour. When was the last time I'd seen someone bake anything that didn't come from a corporate test kitchen? "Mr. Green," she said, and her voice had this warm, cautious quality like honey poured over broken glass. "You didn't have to come all this way." But I did. Because I hadn't slept since the mall. Because every time I closed my eyes I saw Jenny's fearless little face and heard those words, "I'll give you my mom." She led me up 3 flights of narrow stairs to an attic apartment that should have been condemned but instead felt like stepping into a fever dream. Every surface was covered in her work, hand-carved wooden toys, delicate watercolor landscapes, ceramic figurines with faces so expressive they looked ready to speak. The whole space smelled like cedar and vanilla and something else I couldn't name. Hope. Maybe. Or the opposite of everything I'd built my life on. "It's not much," Mary said, and I heard the defensive pride in her voice. Jenny burst from behind a curtain wearing pajamas covered in dinosaurs, dragging her one-eared bear. "Mama, it's the crying man. Did you stop being sad?" I knelt down, something I never did, my knees protesting against the uneven floorboards. "I'm working on it. Thank you for the loan of Mr. Bear." She giggled. "His name is Captain Patches. He's very brave." Mary touched her daughter's shoulder. "Jenny, go wash up for dinner." When the child skipped away, Mary turned to me, and I saw it then, the exhaustion carved into the edges of her beauty. The kind of tired that comes from fighting a war you're slowly losing. "I wanted to thank you properly," I said, holding out the check. She didn't even look at it. "We don't need charity, Mr. Green. We needed kindness that day. You looked like you needed it more." That's when I saw the eviction notice on her cluttered desk. 3 months overdue. And underneath it, a business license for Winter and Daughter Artisan Crafts. The name hit me like a fist to the throat. Winter. Robert Winter. The small craftsman collective my acquisition team had crushed to secure a warehouse district development. I'd killed her father's dream with a signature I didn't even remember making. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my penthouse office with a glass of scotch I never drank and pulled up every file on the Camden warehouse acquisition from 3 years ago. The documents painted a portrait of corporate efficiency I'd once been proud of. 23 small businesses displaced. 18 refused our buyout offers. So we'd buried them in legal fees and zoning violations until they had no choice but to surrender. Winter and Daughter Artisan Collective was number 7 on the list. Robert Winter had fought us for 11 months. He'd written letters, organized protests, even tried to get historical preservation status for his building because his grandfather had started the craft cooperative there in 1952. My legal team had crushed every attempt. The final note in the file was clinical: subject declared bankruptcy. Building acquired for 62% below market value. Demolition scheduled. There was a newspaper clipping attached. Robert Winter's obituary. Heart attack, 6 months after losing everything. Survived by his daughter, Mary, and granddaughter, Jennifer. I'd killed Jenny's grandfather. Not with my hands, but with my indifference, which somehow felt worse. The Scotch glass shattered in my grip. By sunrise, I'd made a list. By noon, I'd started executing it. I couldn't undo what I'd done, but I could damn well stop the bleeding. I called Marcus Chen, my private investigator, the one I used for acquisitions and corporate espionage. I need you to fix someone's life without them knowing it was me. The eviction notice disappeared first. I bought the entire brownstone through a shell corporation, then set the rent at 1/3 of market value for all tenants. Mary would receive a letter about a community assistance program. Next, I had Marcus create a fake commission from a boutique hotel chain looking for custom artwork. 20 pieces at $5,000 each. The contract looked legitimate because I made sure it was. I actually strong-armed the Meridian Hotel Group into honoring it. Then I went deeper. Jenny's pediatric Ian bills, paid through an anonymous charity fund. Mary's father's remaining debts, settled by a fabricated estate correction. Her ancient car that broke down twice a week, I had it towed for city violations and replaced with a reliable used Honda, courtesy of a non-existent contest she'd supposedly won. I became a phantom in their lives, a ghost of good fortune haunting the wreckage I'd created. But ghosts can't stay hidden forever. 3 weeks into my secret redemption project, I showed up at Mary's workshop again, this time with a proposal for a partnership between her craft collective and Titan Ventures' corporate giving program. It was legitimate. It was generous. It was my way of being near them without admitting what I'd done. Mary stood in her doorway covered in sawdust, studying my face like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "Why are you really here, Christopher?" No one called me Christopher. They called me Mr. Green, or Sir, or occasionally, behind closed doors, much worse. "Because," I said, and the truth came out before I could stop it, "you make me believe good things still exist." Her eyes went soft, then suspicious. "What did you do?" "Everything," I thought. "Nothing that matters." Richard Hartwell didn't knock. He never did. He walked into my office at 6 a.m. like he still owned it, which in many ways, he did. He'd built Titan Ventures from nothing, then handed me the crown when his heart couldn't take the pressure anymore. But retired kings never really abdicate, they just watch from the shadows, waiting for their protégé to stumble. "You're distracted," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. Even at 72, Richard had the presence of a predator. Silver hair perfectly styled, 3-piece suit immaculate, eyes like chips of flint. The Vancouver deal should have closed 2 weeks ago. The board is asking questions. I didn't look up from my computer screen where I was reviewing Mary's proposal for the 3rd time that morning. The Vancouver deal has structural issues. I'm being thorough. You've never been thorough. You've been ruthless. There's a difference. He leaned forward, and I caught the scent of his cologne, the same brand he'd worn the day he taught me that sentiment was a liability. "What's her name?" My fingers froze on the keyboard. Excuse me. You heard me, Christopher. I've known you since you were a 23-year-old orphan with more anger than sense. You don't take personal meetings. You don't delay acquisitions. You don't smile at your assistant like you did yesterday when she brought you coffee. His voice dropped to something paternal and poisonous. So I'll ask again. What's her name? I should have lied. I should have deflected. Instead, I made the mistake of meeting his eyes, and Richard Hartwell didn't become a billionaire by missing tells. His smile was surgical. I see. Does she know what you do to people who get in your way? This isn't your concern, Richard. Everything about you is my concern. I made you. Your success is my legacy. He stood, buttoning his jacket with the precision of a man preparing for war. I'll have Marcus look into whoever she is. If she's a liability, we'll handle it quietly. Ice flooded my veins. Marcus works for me now. Does he? Richard's laugh was soft and terrible. Oh, Christopher. You really have gone soft. Marcus has worked for me since before you could spell venture capital. How do you think I've kept you on track all these years? The implication hit me like a freight train. Every investigation I'd ordered. Every private move I'd made. Richard had known. He'd always known. Stay away from her, I said, and my voice came out raw. Then stay away from her yourself. You're building an empire, not a family. I didn't save you from that orphanage and teach you everything I know so you could throw it away for some woman who makes you feel things. He paused at the door, his final words a scalpel between my ribs. Feelings are just weaknesses waiting to be exploited. I taught you that. Don't make me teach you again. The door closed with a whisper. I had 72 hours before Richard discovered who Mary was. And when he did, he'd see exactly what I'd seen, leverage. I'd forgotten what cinnamon smelled like when it wasn't part of a $400 brunch. Mary's kitchen was the size of my closet, and somehow she was pulling miracles out of it. Cookies shaped like stars, hot chocolate that actually required stirring, Jenny's laughter coating everything like sugar. You're doing it wrong, Jenny announced, watching me attempt to use a cookie cutter. You have to press hard and wiggle. I was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals before breakfast. I was being defeated by dough. Mary leaned over, her hair brushing my shoulder, and guided my hands with hers. Like this. Gentle pressure, then twist. Her fingers were warm and sure, stained with years of creating beautiful things while I'd spent years destroying them. The star came out perfect. Jenny cheered like I'd won a Nobel Prize. See? You're not hopeless, Mary said, and when she smiled at me, I felt something in my chest that I'd thought Richard had surgically removed years ago. Hope. The dangerous kind. We spent the afternoon like people in movies I'd never watched. We walked to a park where the swings were rusty and the snow was grey with city soot, and it was the most beautiful place I'd ever been because Jenny held my hand without fear and Mary looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster in an expensive suit. I pushed Jenny on the swings until my shoulders ached. I helped Mary build a lopsided snowman that Jenny insisted needed 17 sticks for arms. I drank gas station coffee that tasted like burnt regret and pretended it was the best thing I'd ever had. Because it was. Why don't you have a family? Jenny asked with the brutal honesty only children possess. We were sitting on a bench while Mary took a phone call, watching the sun turn the dirty snow pink. I thought I didn't need one, I said. I thought I needed other things more. That's silly. Everybody needs people to love them. She looked up at me with those fearless eyes. I love you. So does Mama. I can tell. The world stopped spinning. Mary returned, cheeks flushed from cold and the phone call, and I saw her really look at me, at the way I was holding her daughter's hand, at the expression I couldn't hide fast enough. Christopher, she said softly, and my name in her mouth sounded like forgiveness I didn't deserve. That night, after I'd driven them home in my car that cost more than their yearly rent, Mary stopped me at the door. Thank you for today. For being here. Really here. I wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I kissed her forehead like a coward and left before I could confess that I'd fallen in love with a life I'd already destroyed, with a woman I'd already betrayed, with a future that would shatter the moment she learned my name was on her father's death certificate. Richard was waiting in my penthouse when I got home, holding a folder with Mary's face on it. "We need to talk about your new family," he said. The folder hit my glass coffee table like a judge's gavel. Inside were photographs of me and Mary, at the park, at her doorway, my lips on her forehead. But worse than the pictures were the documents underneath. Every shell corporation I'd created, every anonymous payment, every manufactured miracle in her life traced back to me with surgical precision. And beneath it all, the acquisition file with my signature next to her father's name. "Her name is Mary Winter," Richard said, pouring himself my scotch like he owned it. "Daughter of Robert Winter, the stubborn craftsman who cost us 11 months and $2 million in legal fees. You remember him, don't you? The one who died still fighting us." He swirled his glass, watching me with the expression of a scientist observing a failed experiment. "You've been playing guardian angel to the daughter of a man you killed. That's either poetry or pathology. I haven't decided which. Get out of my house. This isn't your house, Christopher. It's a monument to everything I taught you. And right now, you're pissing on that legacy for a woman who bakes cookies." He stood, straightening his cuffs. "I'm giving you 48 hours to end this cleanly. Walk away, write her a check big enough to ease your conscience, and get back to work. Or I'll end it my way. Touch her and I'll destroy you." Richard's smile was almost fond. "You won't. Because I made you in my image, and deep down, you know I'm right. Men like us don't get happy endings with paint-stained women and gap-toothed children. We get empires." He left the folder on the table like a bomb with a timer. 48 hours. Choose wisely. I called Mary 17 times. She didn't answer. I drove to her apartment at midnight and found the lights off, but I knew she was awake because I could feel her heart break through the walls like radiation. The envelope came the next morning, delivered to her door by someone on Richard's payroll. I know because I watched from my car like a stalker as Mary opened it, read the contents, and slowly crumpled to her knees in the doorway. When she finally let me in 3 hours later, her eyes were dry. "That's how I knew it was over. Is it true?" Her voice was steady as a scalpel. "Did your company destroy my father's business?" "Yes." "Did you know who I was when you showed up at my door with that check?" "Yes." "Have you been secretly fixing my life out of guilt?" "Yes." The word tasted like ash. She nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something she'd been afraid to believe. "My father died believing he'd failed us. He had a heart attack in that workshop, surrounded by half-finished toys he couldn't sell because you'd taken everything from him. And you," her voice finally cracked, "you let me fall in love with you knowing what you'd done." "Mary." "Jenny asked me this morning if you were going to be her daddy." Tears now, streaming silent and devastating. "Get out. And if you ever loved us at all, don't come back." I left because she asked me to. Because it was the first time I'd done something she wanted instead of something I decided she needed. Richard called as I reached my car. "Good boy. Now let's get back to business." But he didn't know about the gala. He didn't know I'd already seen his real plan in those files. And he definitely didn't know that walking away from Mary Winter was the last mercy I had left to give before I burned his empire to the ground. The board meeting was an execution dressed as corporate procedure. 14 faces around a marble table, and I'd bought drinks for half of them, made fortunes for the others. None of them would look me in the eye. Richard sat at the far end like a king reclaiming his throne. "Gentlemen, we're here to discuss Christopher Green's recent performance inconsistencies and concerning personal entanglements that pose a liability to Titan Ventures." I'd walked into wars more prepared than this. I'd dismantled competitors with less evidence than Richard had compiled against me. But I'd been distracted, bleeding from a wound shaped like Mary's face, and I'd missed the knife until it was already between my ribs. The vote took 4 minutes. Unanimous removal, effective immediately. They didn't even have the decency to make it close. "Your severance package is generous," Richard said as security waited to escort me out of my own building. $50 million and an NDA. "You'll be comfortable. You just won't be relevant." He leaned close enough that only I could hear. I told you feelings were weaknesses. Consider this your final lesson. I was in my penthouse, former penthouse. The eviction notice would come tomorrow, when Marcus called. Except it wasn't Marcus. It was his assistant, and her voice was shaking. Mr. Green, Marcus told me if anything happened to him, I should contact you directly. Ice flooded my spine. What happened? He was asking questions about Mr. Hartwell's activities. Private questions. He found something about a woman named Mary Winter and her daughter, some kind of contingency plan, and then, she was crying now. He's in the hospital. They're saying it was a mugging, but his last words before the ambulance were protect the girl. The phone slipped from my hand. I pulled up every security protocol I still had access to, which Richard had been sloppy enough not to revoke yet, and found the file Marcus had died trying to send me. It was a contract with a private security firm, dated for tonight. The target location was Mary's address. The objective was listed as asset acquisition and leverage containment. They were going to take Jenny. Richard wasn't just removing me from the board. He was teaching me what happened when his protégés forgot their place. He was going to hurt the only people I'd ever loved to prove that love was a weapon he could wield better than I ever could. I had no company, no security team, no power, but I had 17 years of ruthless instincts and nothing left to lose. I called the one person who'd never wanted anything from me except the truth. Mary, I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve a second of your time. But Jenny is in danger and I need you to listen to me right now. The silence on the other end lasted a lifetime. I'm listening, she whispered. Pack a bag. Don't ask questions. I'm 2 minutes away. Richard had taught me to be a monster. He'd forgotten that monsters don't heal when you point them at the things they love. They burn the world down instead. The Titan Ventures Christmas Gala was held at the Grand Point Hotel, 12 floors of crystalline excess where champagne cost more per glass than Mary made in a week. I'd planned this event 6 months ago when I still believed expensive things mattered. Now I was crashing it through the service entrance with bolt cutters and a security card I'd cloned before they could deactivate it. Mary had refused to stay hidden. If my daughter is in there, I'm coming with you. So we moved through the service corridors like ghosts haunting my former life, her hand tight in mine, both of us underdressed and overdetermined. I could hear the gala above us, 500 guests celebrating profits and power, while somewhere in this building, a 5-year-old girl was being used as a lesson in obedience. There, Mary whispered, pointing at a security monitor. Jenny's red coat, that ridiculous barriered hat, disappearing around a corner with a man in a black suit. Not security. Private contractor. Richard's specialty. We ran. The gala's main floor was a nightmare of my own design, ice sculptures and string quartets, board members laughing with champagne-slick mouths, Richard at the center of it all like a spider in a web made of my failures. He saw me the moment I emerged from the stairwell. Our eyes locked across 200 feet of polished marble, and his smile was surgical. He raised his glass to me. A toast. A taunt. Then he stepped to the microphone at the podium where I was supposed to have given my farewell speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest tonight. Christopher Green, our former CEO, has just arrived with a rather interesting companion. The spotlight found us, blinding and brutal. Some of you may not know that Christopher has been romantically involved with Mary Winter, daughter of Robert Winter, the craftsman whose business we acquired 3 years ago. The same acquisition that made us 30 million in profit. The room went silent except for the string quartet, still playing because no one had told them to stop. It's a touching story, really. The corporate raider falls for the daughter of his victim. Very Shakespearean. Richard's voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. What's less touching is that Christopher has been embezzling company resources to fund his guilt. Shell corporations. Fraudulent contracts. All traceable. All prosecutable. Mary's hand slipped from mine. She was looking at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time, and the recognition in her eyes wasn't love, it was devastation at a depth I couldn't measure. But none of that matters right now, I said, my voice cutting through the whispers. Where is Jenny? Richard's smile widened. The child is safe. She's simply insurance that you'll sign the documents my lawyers have prepared. A complete admission of your embezzlement, a release of all claims against Titan Ventures, and a promise to disappear." He gestured to a side door. "She's waiting in the executive suite. Sign, and you can have your little family. Refuse, and I'll make sure Mary loses her daughter to child services while you lose your freedom to federal prison." The room was watching, waiting. I looked at Mary, at the tears streaming down her face, at the choice I'd created by being exactly what Richard made me to be. Then Jenny screamed from somewhere above us, and every calculation I'd ever made became irrelevant. Jenny's scream came from the atrium, the hotel's architectural centerpiece, a 5-story open space with a fountain at the center designed to mimic the one at Glenbrook Mall. The same fountain where a broken man had met a fearless girl who'd offered him her mother. Richard had chosen his stage perfectly. I took the stairs 3 at a time, Mary behind me, security converging from every direction. The atrium was chaos, guests flooding in to witness the spectacle, phones out, recording my destruction in real time. And there, on the fountain's marble ledge 4 stories above the ground floor, was Jenny in her red coat, held by a man whose face I recognized from Richard's private contractor files. "Let her go." Mary's voice shattered against the marble and glass. Richard appeared beside us, calm as a surgeon mid-operation. "Sign the documents, Christopher. This ends when you accept what you are." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at Jenny, at her terrified face, and suddenly I wasn't in the Grand Point Hotel anymore. I was 12 years old in a department store, holding my sister's hand until the crowd surged and she slipped away. I was searching faces, screaming her name, finding only strangers who couldn't see my emergency past their holiday shopping. I was the boy who'd learned that love was just another thing that could be stolen if you weren't strong enough to hold on. "Christopher." Mary's hand found mine, and her touch pulled me back. "Please." The contractor was negotiating his exit, backing toward a service door with Jenny struggling in his arms. Security wasn't moving, Richard's orders. The guests were watching like this was dinner theater. And I had a choice: sign Richard's papers and live the rest of my life knowing I'd bent, or do what I should have done 17 years ago when the world taught me to be afraid. I ran. Not toward the stairs. Toward the decorative trellis running up the atrium wall, the one the hotel designer had insisted on despite my safety concerns. I climbed like I was 20 again, like my joints didn't ache, like physics was a suggestion. Mary was screaming my name. Richard was shouting orders. None of it mattered. I reached the 4th-floor ledge as the contractor realized I was insane enough to close the distance. He shoved Jenny toward the railing, not enough to push her over, just enough to make me stop. But Jenny was Robert Winter's granddaughter. She was made of braver things than men like him understood. She bit his hand, twisted like Mary had probably taught her, and drove her elbow into his stomach exactly where a 5-year-old's elbow would do maximum damage. He let go. She ran to me. I caught her, and for the first time in 17 years, I didn't lose the child I was trying to save. "I knew you'd come," Jenny whispered against my chest, clutching Captain Patches with one hand and my shirt with the other. "Mama said you were a good man who forgot for a while. But I always knew." Below us, Richard's face was a mask of controlled fury. The phones were still recording. The guests were silent. And Mary was climbing the trellis toward us with the determination of a woman who'd already lost too much to fear falling. When she reached us, when her arms wrapped around both of us on that narrow ledge, I finally understood what I'd been searching for in boardrooms and balance sheets. This was the only empire worth building. "It's over, Richard," I called down. "Whatever you do to me, everyone just watched you threaten a child. Your legacy ends tonight." His smile never wavered. "Does it? Or does yours?" Then he pulled something from his jacket, and I saw the truth I'd been too blind to see. Medical records. Transplant documentation. My mother's name next to Mary's. Shall we tell them about the real connection between you two? Richard's voice carried like a prophet's. How Mary Winter saved your mother's life 8 years ago with an anonymous kidney donation. How you've been searching for that donor for years, spending millions. He looked directly at Mary. How Christopher's obsession with finding you had nothing to do with love and everything to do with a debt he couldn't stand to leave unpaid. Mary's arms went slack around me. "No," I said. "That's not." But her eyes told me she was already doing the math. Already wondering if every moment between us had been transaction instead of truth. "Mary, I didn't know it was you until..." "Until when?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Until after you'd already destroyed my father. Until after you decided to play God with my life." She pulled Jenny close, away from me. "Was any of it real, Christopher? Or was I just another acquisition you felt guilty about?" Richard had won after all. Not with contracts or threats, but with the one weapon I had no defense against. The truth. I didn't see Mary for 3 weeks. She wouldn't take my calls, wouldn't answer her door, and I didn't blame her because Richard had been right about one thing. I'd built our entire relationship on a foundation of guilt and secrets, and foundations like that don't hold. But on the 22nd day, an envelope arrived at the extended stay hotel where I was living like a ghost of my former life. Inside was a single sheet of paper in handwriting I recognized from grocery lists and permission slips I'd seen on Mary's refrigerator. "I gave you my kidney because a little girl needed her grandmother. You destroyed my father's business because you'd forgotten people were more than obstacles. Both things are true. Come to the workshop tomorrow at noon if you want to figure out which one matters more." The workshop wasn't her attic apartment anymore. It was the rebuilt Camden Artisan Collective, funded by the only thing Richard hadn't been able to take from me, my personal fortune. I'd spent 3 weeks and $40 million reconstructing what I'd destroyed, brick by brick, reaching out to every artisan my company had displaced, offering them not charity but partnership. Mary was standing in the center of it when I arrived, surrounded by woodworkers and painters and craftsmen who had every reason to spit in my face. Jenny sat in the corner with Captain Patches, watching me with those fearless eyes that had saved my life once before. "I don't forgive you," Mary said, and the words hit like hammers. "My father died because of what you did, and no amount of money changes that." "I know." But Jenny asked me what love means, and I told her it means seeing someone's worst parts and choosing them anyway. She stepped closer, sawdust in her hair, paint on her hands, absolutely devastating. "You were a monster who learned to be a man. That doesn't erase what you did. But maybe," her voice cracked, "maybe it means something that you tried." I had negotiated billion-dollar deals with steadier hands than the ones I held out to her. I spent 8 years looking for the angel who saved my mother. I found a woman who saved me instead. Everything I did wrong, I did before I knew what I was destroying. Everything I'm trying to do right, I'm doing because you showed me what matters. Pretty words from a man who used to trade in ugly ones. Then don't trust my words. Trust this. I pulled out the papers I'd spent 3 weeks preparing. Full ownership of the collective transferred to you and the artisans. My name nowhere on it. I walk away completely if that's what you need. She didn't take the papers. Instead, she looked at Jenny, who nodded like they'd already discussed this, like I was the only one still catching up. "Or," Mary said softly, "you stay and learn to build things instead of breaking them. You show up every day and prove that Christopher Green can be more than Richard Hartwell's greatest mistake." She finally took my hands, her fingers strong and sure and stained with the evidence of creating beautiful things. "You love us not because you owe us, but because you choose us. Every single day." "I choose you," I said. "Every day. Every hour. For the rest of my life if you'll let me." Jenny appeared between us, grabbing both our hands. "Does this mean you're my daddy now?" I looked at Mary. She was crying, but smiling, and in her eyes I saw something Richard had never understood. Mercy wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing broken people could offer each other. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to meet those fearless eyes. "If you'll have me." She threw her arms around my neck. "I told Mama you just needed fixing. She fixes everything." 6 months later, Richard Hartwell faced federal charges for corporate espionage and attempted kidnapping. I testified against him, burning the last bridge to the man who'd made me. The trial made headlines. The conviction made history. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was too busy teaching Jenny how to use a hammer in the workshop that bore her grandfather's name, while Mary painted a mural on the wall depicting a fountain where broken things went to be made whole. We got married in that workshop, surrounded by artisans and former enemies, by people who'd learned that second chances were the only thing worth investing in. Jenny was the flower girl. Captain Patches was the ring bearer. And when Mary whispered, "I do," I finally understood what I'd been searching for in every boardroom and balance sheet. Not an empire of steel and stock prices, but this, sawdust and paint stains, a 5-year-old's laughter, and a woman brave enough to hand a stranger her heart when he'd already stolen everything else. Richard had been right about one thing. Men like us don't usually get happy endings. But he'd forgotten that some men learn to become different. And those men, the ones who choose love over legacy, family over fortune, mercy over mastery, they don't just get happy endings. They get to build them with their own scarred hands, one imperfect day at a time, surrounded by people who see their worst and choose them anyway. I never found my sister that day in the department store. But I found something better in a mall fountain 17 years later. I found the family I didn't know I was looking for. And this time, I held on tight enough to keep them. If this story reminded you that broken people can still build beautiful things, that love is the only empire worth fighting for, then do me a favor right now. Hit that like button and subscribe, because I pour my heart into every story I write, and your support means everything. Drop a comment and tell me, do you believe Christopher deserved his second chance? Or are some sins too deep for redemption? I want to know what you think, because stories like this only matter when they make us feel something real. And if you know someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose differently, to become more than your worst mistakes, share this with them. Sometimes a story finds someone at exactly the right moment, and maybe this is that moment for someone you love. I've got more stories coming that will wreck you and rebuild you just like this one did. Stories about second chances, impossible choices, and the kind of love that refuses to give up even when it should. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's build something beautiful together, one story at a time. Until next time, remember, the best investments aren't made in boardrooms. They're made in moments when we choose love over everything else we thought mattered. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing that even iron architects can learn to build with something softer than steel. Now go hug someone you love, and I'll see you in the next story.